So I want to talk to you about a few things. And really, if I kind of wind it back, the first question I would ask is, if we were to design a workplace for collective intelligence, for diversity of thinking, what would it look like? And when I asked myself that question, I wondered how much of that actually looks like our workplace today. And thinking of a couple of things in terms of connections. Am I connecting with enough people or the right people to give me that diversity of thinking? Well, would I set up organisations that look like this, that look like, as General McChrystal was talking about, silos of people built around functional lines? Would I set up a workplace in which we actually have multiples of this? This is, lots and lots of different organisations working in their siloed ways. If I cut another lens through it and think about it in time, would it look like my diary? And my diary with back-to-back meetings, it looks like every 30 minutes, 7 days a week, and working on weekends if I need to as well. And I'm not sure how closely that represents your diary. Hopefully you're not trying to read the minutiae of the words in there, but how closely it represents in terms of the lack of thinking time. Would I design something that is actually ideas on demand? I've got to produce something and it's got to be by a specific time, or would I do something more luxurious? And thirdly, so we've talked about connections and time, if I think about information, would I have designed it so that my inbox has 1,600 unread emails in it? That was a snapshot from yesterday. And when I said that to Dr. Carl and was sort of lamenting, oh my God, I've got 1,600 unread emails because in my organisation that is very bad, he told me he had 170,000, unread emails. He says he just doesn't read them. So note to self, don't email Dr. Carl because he doesn't read them. He has 300,000 followers on Twitter and he says they all want to say hi to him, so he doesn't communicate in that way anymore. Fair enough. And then thinking more closely, and I've just published a book on this in which I was starting to dig into the research, and just think conceptually, would I create meetings which are really a series of random brainstorms? And Professor Brian Mullins out of Syracuse University did some longitudinal research about over 25 years and was looking at a series of the way that we do meetings and looking at random brainstorming. And his conclusion is that brainstorming has no productive value. And that's compelling. That's so interesting because that is our mode of choice. When we convene a meeting with people, we just think because we're a democratic environment that what we should do is just say, everyone just pile your ideas on top of each other. And what he was saying is that there's so much productivity loss because if you're doing that with a multidisciplinary team, and we need multidisciplinary teams to get those breakthrough insights, the first thing is you can't understand what the heck the other person is saying. They're using jargon that you're not using. And if you look at that diagram up there, I think it kind of expresses itself in this way. You've got a person who's sitting back, see the guy in the top corner there, doing a bit of what's called social loafing. It's kind of, everyone else, you work it out, let me know, when you're ready, I'll come back in. And then we've got someone down in the bottom left-hand corner writing her to-do list. She could have been on emails. She's actually not present. She's doing something else. You've got an offside conversation going on in the back there. You've got someone with their head in their hands. What the heck are you talking about? And then you've got the leader of the group going, come on. And I wonder how much that replicates the experience when we go through meetings. And if my diary is a series of back-to-back meetings that look more like brainstorming than conscious thought, how much am I progressing towards this nirvana of collective intelligence? And so as I say, I started thinking about this and started wondering all of the different processes and practices within our organisation. If I had started with a blank slate, is that how I would have designed it? Can you just take 10 seconds and talk to the person next to you and just process that information about what I've just said, and imagine if you could think of anything else. I've talked about connections, I've talked about time, I've talked about information. Can you just have a conversation with the person? If you were thinking about designing a workplace for collective intelligence, what else would you want to throw out? Okay, let's take some time. Give me some ideas. What did you come up with just in 30 seconds?
Yeah, I was saying a new technique is brain writing.
Brain writing?
Where you write down on notes your ideas and then you share.
Right.
Yeah.
You would throw that out?
Yeah.
Oh, why? Why would you throw it out?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I'll put that in.
Oh, put it in. You put it in, okay? So it's a way of individualising contribution.
Yes,
Yeah, okay. That's a good idea. Anyone throw anything out?
The meeting has to last as long as it's scheduled for.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's in the diary. Yeah.
The CEO gets to approve or disapprove everyone else's ideas.
Oh, right. A sort of veto point. Yeah, a gatekeeper. Anyone else?
Open plan offices.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. So, so much productivity loss, not only the noise, but just the sort of the idea of concentration, right? Is that where you were going to?
And also the fact that sometimes you need to have private conversations.
Yeah.
And the spaces aren't necessarily configured.
Right. We've got 3 good ideas already as to what we get rid of, and potentially 1 good idea as to how we would do it differently. So I spent a couple of years thinking about this as well. And here's the things that I came up with. When I was looking at collective intelligence, it seemed to me that it boiled down to 3 things. So if I was redesigning it, I'd get rid of those things, and what would I put in place? And I needed to understand the component parts that were going to create collective intelligence in able to rebuild. Now, I don't know that I've done the rebuild, but at least I know the things that I need to focus on. And the first thing that I was finding was that you really did need to focus on who was sitting around that table. You needed people to sit around who had the capability to be there. They had the requisite skills or knowledge, but actually there was something in their diversity that created the collective intelligence. Now, the way that we've been thinking about it for a long time has been multidisciplinary teams, particularly in a university setting, particularly in a sort of science environment. But I went back and had a look at that research, and some of those teams, those multidisciplinary teams, are highly effective, highly productive, overproduce relative to the intelligence of the individual people. But most of them don't. Most multidisciplinary teams underperform or reach average performance. So they are not capitalising on it. So it was something in addition to that. There had to be something else going on. So I was thinking about who was sitting at the table. And I kind of came up with a model around the different ways that people think about things, their internal mental models, and how many of those you need. And the basis for that thinking came from some research out of Professor Scott Page at Michigan University, and he was saying that you needed between 5 and 8 genuinely diverse perspectives. That is, that person and that person see the world from genuinely different points of view to get to 100% accuracy if there's a known answer. When you have 9 diverse perspectives, it actually falls to a curvilinear relationship, and you start to fall down the other side because it's just too much noise and you can't take it in. So he was saying to me that between 5 and 8, I started off on a journey trying to identify what the heck would those 5 to 8 be, and I ended up finding there were actually sort of 6 different ways that people defaulted to in terms of thinking about problems. And he reviewed my book and said, yeah, I think that's probably right. And some people like to think about problems in a very process-driven way. They like to think about how things are going to happen when they're complex problem solving. Where's the beginning? Where's the end? What are the steps on the journey? Other people, for example, say, look, I'm not so interested in process, but what I'm really interested in is defining the outcomes that we're going to achieve. I really need to know a lot about the vision for success. And anyway, I'm not going to talk so much about that today, but different ways of thinking about problems. So there was a who, there was a how, and that how going to structured ways of thinking. So, for example, what you came up with just then around individualising commentary, but not doing unstructured, random brainstorming. But where I want to lean into today, I've only got a short amount of time, is the last one. It's about how people behave in those groups and how they are led. So we've got composition, structure, and then this last one, which is human behaviour. So where I want to lean into that is thinking about how people behave, and secondly, how leaders lead. And if you think about that for yourself as a question, it is, are you leading so inclusively that those diverse perspectives will be able to come forward? So to answer that question, we actually have to go back just for a second and define inclusion. Because inclusion is not a woolly word, it actually has elements to it. And when I was writing a paper a few years ago and walked into a room of executives and said, I'd like to talk about inclusive leadership, one of the executives, the CEO in the room, said, we're going to talk about giving everyone a hug. So that, of course, became the name of the paper, Inclusive Leadership, Will a Hug Do? And a hug is not where we're going for here. A hug is something that's sort of tangible and touchy-feely, and I think of inclusion quite differently, and I know that you do too. So our exercise in first exercise and in collective intelligence right now is for me to ask you a question, and it's this. To remember a time you were working in a group and you felt highly included. If I give you no more words than that, can you put a bit more around it? How would you define it? So can you turn to the person on the other side and remember an experience? And when I felt highly included, I felt, what? Just give it another noun, verb, whatever you want to do, another word to describe highly included. And together we will create a great definition. Okay, let's take time. That was really interesting. So when I asked you the first question around collective intelligence, what would you get rid of, you were into it straight away. Oh, there's so many things we could get rid of here. And when I asked you a question around inclusion, it was actually a voice that kind of built. And I saw some of you kind of sitting back and go, inclusion, highly included. Not sure that's actually happened to me. But then you kind of got into it, like, yeah, I did. I remember that time. And then your voices rose. And I want to get to the outcome. If you can give me a couple of words around that, I will try and build this model, which is, I developed this model looking at a lot of other people's research and then go and testing it with a lot of different organisations around the world. And what I found is that inclusion has very discrete components, and those components build on each other. So therefore you can ask people these series of questions to get to whether they individually and then collectively feel highly included. And the outcome is the more that diverse people feel highly included, the more it creates collective intelligence. And there's another piece of research that I've got coming out in October which proves that point once again. But it's intuitively correct and it is evidentially correct. It's correct. So give me some words around that. And what I'm going to do, thank you, I'm going to plot them, right? So we can see that there's a starting point. This is like a build a stepping stone, and you have to have all of them to get to it. You can't get to this highest level of inclusion unless you have these ones sequencing through. So you can't tell people, I want you to feel this highest level of inclusion if they don't even have this baseline here. Okay, we'll build it together. So what was your
Value.
values? Okay, so valued sit squarely in the middle of it, right? And you had valued as well. This sense of I personally am valued. I am known. People want me, particularly in the group, and they value the contribution that I have. Is that, I'm calibrating, is that how you were thinking about it? Yeah? All right, so valued, sitting right in the middle. Recognized. And it's about you. Someone actually says it's you. I want you in the group. I recognize your uniqueness. So uniqueness and value are this middle ground here.
Swagger.
Swagger? What is that? Tell me more.
Moving in a group with confidence.
With confidence. Can you tell me more about that?
Like a sense of a posse, like a group, a tribe.
A belonging?
Belonging, but also with kind of confidence, almost verging on arrogance.
Ooh. Maybe there's a dark side to there, but let's just go with the positive stuff. Because high levels of inclusion in the presence of diversity is what you want, and you want this sort of productive friction. But if I pick up on a couple of words around this sense of posse, right, this sense of belonging, Linda Grattan uses that word posse a lot. So sitting this value and belonging would be the way that I would conceptualize this middle idea, right? And the idea that you're verging on here, confidence, I want to hold that one and see if someone comes up with a different, I want to amend it or append it really to someone else's idea. Let me hold that one. Any other ideas? Engaged, right? Sorry? Energize, engage. And these are outcomes, right? And that's absolutely right. This is the highest level. This is when you're feeling so included in a diverse group. It brings out the best in you. You are inspired to do your best work, right? So this is, I individually am feeling valued and belong. We as a group, oh my God, could not have achieved this outcome. DNA could not have been created if it was not a diverse thinking group of people who truly felt this sense of belonging and connection with each other. Right? Did you have another one? Safe. And that's what I want to append it to, right? Safe, and I'm not sure your confidence one went here, but the highest level, inspired to do your best work and confident to speak up even if you have a point of view which differs from the majority. Psychological safety. That is the highest level of inclusion. You know that you will not be kicked out of the group because you have said something, maybe with swagger, maybe not, but you have said something different from other people. And that is way different to this group down here. This group of people just got in the game. They said inclusion for them is just about being at the table, just a sense of fairness, that there were no favourites in this group, that we had a quality of treatment, that I individually was feeling respected. So collectively, if we take that definition, it is the starting point is that everyone in the group has to feel this baseline of just fairness. And then they move to a sort of individual frame, which is I feel valued, I have this sense of belonging, the posse that we talked about. And then they move up to this higher level, which is actually about I feel inspired and energized, I'm really confident, I feel confident to speak up if I have a different point of view from everyone else. And of course, this is about how you feel. I was asking you questions about what made you feel as if you were included in a group. And if we take the other lens to it, the question is, do you make other people feel like that when they're in your group? Who do you lean into? And if it was asked, you would say, actually, don't really listen to my point of view. A bit of favoritism going on the other side. Not exactly respectful. Or yeah, kind of, but doesn't really value me, I don't really feel a sense of belonging in this group. Or psychologically safe, there's only certain things you can say to her. So if we've got a definition of inclusion, it helps us understand the behaviours that we would want to be manifesting so that those diverse ideas can be brought forward. Because the value proposition is there. It does make a difference. And if you skip through the 270 pages of this book that took me 2 years to write and has like 350 footnotes in it, many of which have 10 citations in it, and then I went and explored it in the field with people testing the ideas, because the advantage of being a partner in Deloitte is that when a client asks me to do work, I get to pitch back to them and I say, oh yeah, I'd like to do that work, but I'd like to do this as well. Would you mind if I did some experimentation on you? And so what I found was that the idea that Scott Page had come up with, that there is this error rate that is built into decisions if you solve from your singular point of view of about 30%, was about right. He said you need between 5 and 8 diverse perspectives to get to 100% accuracy. And on the other hand, he said if you solve things from a single point of view, your own, and a group of people around you who are fundamentally clones, then you are building in an error rate of about 30%. You make blind spots, and he can put a number around the blind spot, and I found that in the field research. And I wanted to understand, could I actually get to neutrality? If I knew who was in the group and I knew how they needed to behave, could I get to something like neutrality? And broadly you can. And then I wanted to understand, which was what Dr. Carl was talking about, could you get to innovation? And could you do it more reliably? Could you do it sort of almost in a box? And it turns out that you can do it better. It's about a sort of 20% improvement on that, a bit of a qualitative judgment. But here was the thing I was not expecting. When you have a diverse thinking team of people and they do make smarter decisions, other people who are looking at that team say, great group of people, I feel my voice was represented there. I will follow that decision. I will buy into it. I will execute it. And so collective intelligence is also about the ability to come up with stuff that other people think that's a great idea. And you obviously thought of the parameters of it. It's a solid decision. So, where does that leave us with? The last thing around inclusion, which is inclusive leadership. And this has been my most recent area of exploration, really trying to understand what inclusive leadership means. Now, I know it doesn't mean giving people a hug, which is what that guy told us, and I know it's got something to do with, respect and value and belonging and fairness and inspiration and confidence. And what I started doing was interviewing people around the world who were identified for me, or I had worked with them, who other people were saying they were highly inclusive. They got the best out of their teams. That leader could move around the world and that team would be high performing before other teams were high performing. And I wanted to understand, what were they thinking about, and then what did they do? And so I started asking that question, think, do, of many leaders, started developing a battery of tests for it, and then could survey people and do 360s around it, so calibrate it. And I found kind of boiled down to 6 things. And these 6 things, they all start with C, right? And you're going to go, really, you're a consultant and you started everything with C. And 4 of them were genuine Cs, and 2 of them I shoehorned into being C. But the concepts behind them are genuine concepts. And the question I'm going to ask you, after I've described this, is just to think and calibrate yourself for a second. And if you think of yourself as a highly inclusive leader, just think about these 6 and which are the ones that you could do better on. Okay, which could you significantly improve on, and which is a strength? Which one do you actually do well? So let me just name them for you, and then I want you to have your last conversation. You'll probably have to turn to the person to the back now, unless you're still friends with the person to the left and the right, in which case, still keep talking to them. But the first one was this, it was commitment. And the piece of research that we're just about to launch next month in Queensland brought this out one more time. If you want collective intelligence, you have to really want it, because it is much easier to do the same thing, connect with the same people in your silos, in your inbox, in your networks, right? It is much easier to do the same than it is to do different, and therefore you have to be really committed to it. When everyone else says, Juliet, enough about collective intelligence, you have to be the person that goes, no, it's not enough, okay? This is important. I want the 30%, I want the 20%, I want the followership. The second thing is courage. And courage is, yes, of course, about challenging the status quo. But actually, courage is about the courage to be vulnerable. The courage to say, I don't have all the answers. I am not as inclusive as I should be. I need other people. And that's kind of hard, right? Because we're actually taught that leadership is more about the confidence and it's not, it's something a little bit different. Because if you open up the space, if you say to other people, if I as a partner in Deloitte say, I don't know everything, I know you know good stuff, right? And I could be actually better at inclusion than I am now. Other people enter your space and say, yeah, I could too, right? So you are creating a moment for other people to enter rather than I am fantastic up on this pedestal, just watch me, and they go and they won't actually engage. The next one is cognizance of bias. It is understanding who we lean into and who we lean out from. In our networks of people, who do we connect to and who do we not connect to? Which information do we listen to and what do we not listen to? And how much do we actually take in this idea of cognitive depletion? If my inbox looks like that, what time am I carving out for myself to think? What time am I carving out to really engage with diverse thinking? Because to understand someone's genuinely different point of view does not come easy. The next one there is curiosity. And curiosity is this idea that you do active behaviours to listen to other people because you are genuinely interested in the different way that they see the world. Hard to engage, but you believe that's going to be of significant value. And the current Chief of Army, Angus Campbell is his name, he replaced David Morrison, whom many of you know as the Australian of the Year. He has this thing he calls the art of the pause. Because you can imagine someone like him, he's very senior, it's a hierarchical organisation. No one wants to speak up and say something that might contradict, potentially, Angus. And he is one smart bunny. And so he does this thing called the art of the pause where he creates just a little bit too much tension in that moment. You know what it's like when you're having a conversation with someone and then someone stops talking and you're thinking, who's going to talk first? Who's going to jump into this moment, right? That's like scary. There's white space going on here. And you've got that tension building up inside yourself, and Angus's strategy is to let it go on a little bit too long. And so someone else will voice their point of view. Now, it's not Machiavellian. What he's trying to do is counteract the bias to actually defer to him. But curiosity is where he's coming from, because he says, I might have 80% of the ideas, but there's 20% that comes from someone else. And the 20% is where the gold happens. And I need to be different to enable that to come out. The next one, cultural intelligence or cultural adaptability, that is understanding that people see the world from different paradigms, and their paradigm is no better or no worse than your paradigm, and it is about understanding and calibrating. And then the last one, collaboration. When you have a diverse team, you have minute default lines and sometimes chasms. And as an inclusive leader, your job is to make sure that they are stitched together, doing deliberate things to make a difference. And one of the people, and if you get a chance to read the book, one of the people that I interviewed was a guy who was a leader in Afghanistan, and he was behaving in this inclusive way, and he had to create a collaborative team that was comprised of people who, yes, they were Australians, but they were also Americans and Afghanis and Singaporeans, and he had to bring them all together into a highly collaborative team. And he had to have an environment that made no mistakes. because you can't make a mistake when you're on the battlefront. And so he has a very interesting story as to how he created that collaborative team. So, thinking about yourself here, which would be a strength that you would want to work on? What might you want to do differently? There were the 6. Do you want me to just put that up for a second? There. If you had to pick one, can you name it to someone and say, you know what, I think I'm going to work on that one. If that's the stuff that makes a difference. You just have a 30-second conversation with one of those 2 friends you've made today. Okay, that was 30 seconds. Coming back to me. I love the fact that this was the most energized conversation. That's very cool. So you were most energized thinking about how you could self-improve, what you could do better. That is very, very cool. Thank you for doing that. So the messages that I would want to leave you with, and hopefully these become self-evident. If you don't design for the inclusion of diversity, you just get the status quo. And the status quo that we have right now is kind of a combination of these elements. And so the message that I would want to leave you with is that to be inclusive of diversity of thinking requires real effort. It requires effort in terms of the people that you choose to have around the table and understanding the different ways that they see the world. It requires difference in the way that you behave towards them, how included they feel, and it requires leaning into those 6 signature traits, because they're the ones that these highly inclusive leaders tell us make a difference. So at the end of the day, it's all about choice. Thank you.